Good morning. Today we're going to take a look at two terrific ways to factor your quadratic equations no matter what math class you're in. Let's go. So the first quadratic we're going to look at, 3x squared minus 14x minus 24, has a coefficient to the x squared term, and that is the type that most people really struggle with. So let me show you how to use the x method even when you have a coefficient. Okay, x method starts with an x. What goes up top is AC, the coefficient of the x squared times your constant term, right? AX squared plus BX plus C, AC. So in this case, that's minus 72. Down below just goes the B. And now the question we're always asking is what multiplies to the top and adds to the bottom? So the first place to start is with what multiplies to the top. Let's make a factor list. All right, so there are our factors, and we're looking through each pair to say which ones could we combine to make a 14. Not that, not that, not that. That looks good, right? If I do an 18 and a 4, I can get a 14 out of that. Not that, not that. So here we are. Put them in your X. And now notice the following. We're multiplying and creating a negative. That means one, but not both of those are negative. 14, negative 14 is what we get, which means our larger number needs to be the negative. Okay, so now, because we have this coefficient of the x squared, these are not directly what goes in the parentheses. It's not x plus 4, x minus 18, because if we FOILed that, that would not get us a 3x squared. These are instead the coefficients of those two middle terms when you FOIL, first, outside, inside, last. If FOIL doesn't mean anything to you, go check out this video. Otherwise, let's write our four terms out. So there's our firsts, outsides, insides, which we just learned from our X method, and last. And it does not matter which order you put these in, your answer at the end of this process will be the same. Okay, next up, we finish this up by factoring by grouping. If you don't know what that is, go check this method, but otherwise, let's lay our two sets of brackets on this. Please note that this minus here gets included in our brackets. If we didn't include it, if we instead made that minus 18x minus 24, that would apply that minus not only to the 18x where we want it, but to the minus 24, which would change our problem. So your bracket has to include the positive or negative of this term. All right, now we look at each of these sets of brackets and we factor out the largest common term to each one. So here, 3 and 4 share nothing in common, but x squared and x both contain an x, so we factor it out of each term. And don't forget, factor means divide. So 3x squared divided by x leaves me with 3x, 4x divided by x leaves me with 4. We do the same thing over here, but always, 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 if you have a leading negative, make sure you're factoring that negative out of both terms as part of what you're doing. So greatest common between negative 18 and negative 24 is going to be a negative 6. And negative 18 divided by negative 6 leaves me with positive 3x. And negative 24 divided by negative 6 leaves me with positive 4. Now, here's your check. What is currently inside your parentheses should be the same. If it's not, you did something wrong, go back. Because now our final step is we have this term, which contains a 3x plus 4, and this term, which contains a 3x plus 4. So we factor 3x plus 4 out of both terms. And we're left with an x from this term and a minus 6 from this term. And that is the full factorization of this using the x method, factoring by grouping. Okay, I'm going to show you another way to do this that is also beautifully efficient, where the x method shows you why you're doing each step. This method, the WHY, is a little hidden, but the execution of it is speedy and lovely. So let's look. Okay, so we're going to work with 8x squared minus 10x minus 3. We're going to start again with AC. So 8 times negative 3 is negative 24, and that is going to become our new last term. We're going to write our middle term exactly as it is, and we're going to write our first term, but minus that coefficient, x squared minus 10x minus 24. Okay, now we're going to factor this. So I'm actually going to lean on the x method, although you could do this just with two sets of parentheses. What multiplies to negative 24 adds to negative 10 factor list. Okay, well, both 2 and 12 and 4 and 6 could create a 10, but I know that to multiply to a negative 24, only one of them could be negative. And to create this negative 10 with 4 and 6, they would both have to be negative. So I'm going to use my 2 and 12. And again, since I need my b to end up being negative, that means the larger of these two is negative. Now, because I don't have a coefficient of my x squared at this moment, these are the two things that will go in my parentheses. So my next step looks like this. Okay, but we know that that isn't the end of things because, first of all, 2 and negative 12 don't multiply to our negative 3, and x and x don't multiply to our 8. So to finish it up, we take that 8 that we dropped here, and now we currently divide each of these that we just found by that 8. We're going to simplify those fractions. So 2 over 8 becomes 1/4, and minus 12 over 8 becomes minus 3/2. In doing this simplification, if either of these constants became an integer, then we are done. That is one of the factors. But whatever still has a denominator, we are now going to take that denominator and multiply it into the x. And this is the fully factored form of that. Okay, challenge. Take this and run it through the x method just like this. Show yourself that you get the same thing in both methods. Alternatively, take this and FOIL it out and prove to yourself that yes, this wackadoodle method actually did get you to your factoring. Okay, stay tuned for an in-depth analysis of why in the world this works. But meanwhile, go ahead and use it whether you're doing your rational functions or you're in Algebra 1 first learning how to factor. Leave any questions or challenging problems in the comments. Consider subscribing to my channel so you know when I put out a new video. And as always, keep on mathing.